Hey guys, Ash here coming at you today in Raid Shadow Legends. Welcome to the video, guys. We have a new Fragment summon coming to the game in just 3 days. Thursday, October 26th. Say hello to legendary Force Affinity HP-based Bannerlord Timit the Fool. Let's take a look at his kit. So as I just rattled off, he's an HP-based Bannerlord legendary champion, Force Affinity, and he is going to be a Fragment summon. Now, I like Fragment summons a lot better than fusions, and I'm just gonna say, before we even review his very mediocre kit, what looks to be mediocre, I've identified something that could give this guy some real utility, and I think that the majority, 99%, I'm obviously recording this before the news goes live, I think that people are gonna hate on this dude and call him the easiest skip of all time. And I totally understand that because he's not super overwhelming, and I mean, you only have so many resources, right? And they bleed you pretty dry in this game. So no hate, and totally understand if you're gonna skip, but let's go ahead and take an in-depth look at this kit and talk about how we could potentially use this dude, right? So on Carnival Hammer, his A1 ability attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit heals this champion by 10% of his max HP. If the target's under no active buff, each hit also fills this champion's turn meter by 10%. So potentially a 20% turn meter fill and a 20% heal on the A1. The turn meter fill does make sense when you read the rest of his kit. Starting with Test Your Strength, I want to pause for a second and look at the book requirements here. Not bad at all, right? Very reasonable. We have 4 books on the A1, 2 books on the A2, 2 books on the A3, and 4 of those books go right to the cooldowns, okay? Speaking of cooldowns, the first thing you'll notice is they're pretty dang long. 6 book down to 4, 6 book down to 4. We really want 3-turn cooldowns in this game. Let's read on. On Test Your Strength, attacks all enemies. Again, an HP-based damage here. Attacks all enemies. Decrease the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. What? We don't have a 3-turn buff decreaser in the game. Why would they do that and not just strip an enemy? I'll tell you in just a second. If there are no enemies with active buffs, grants an extra turn. Always grants an extra turn if Kaja the Rise on the same team, even if the enemies do have buffs. So he's a companion champion with Kaja the Rai. So let's read this ability again. An AoE, decreased duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. We know that 95% of the time, provided we're not going against, protected buffs, right? We're going to be able to decrease the duration of all enemy buffs and totally remove them, right? Because 3 turns, I mean, there's not many 4-turn buffs out there, so we're going to be removing them. Where do they want us to play this champion? He's obviously an arena champion or a progression control champion, talking like Doom Tower waves or, progression in dungeons. But other than that, he's an arena champion. So decrease the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. Unlike stripping buffs, it's actually not going to trigger polymorph, okay? So he's an anti-polymorph champion. Now, if no enemies have buffs afterwards, he's going to grant that extra turn. Granting that extra turn is really imperative to getting value out of this champion in the arena, in a PvP environment. Let's read on and we'll come back to it. Kegs of Dread, his A3, attacks all enemies before attacking, places an increased accuracy on all allies for 2 turns, places a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. So this is kind of a watered down version or a less good version. Let me go back to Yoshi the Drunkard, right? Who coincidentally was the first Fragment summon Shadowkin legendary ever added to the game. Also Force Affinity. So on his A3, Battle Toast, increase attack, increase accuracy, True Fear. True Fear, they have to be under increased attack to get 100% on it, but it's a 3-turn cooldown. He also has increased attack, making him the best bomb setup champion in the game. All right, guys, so best case scenario, and I want to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about damage, I want to talk about buff, and I want to talk about what could go wrong. But first, best case scenario. We open up with the A2 in the arena. We attack all enemies. We decrease the duration of all their buffs so they'll have no buffs left. If there are no enemies with active buffs, we get an extra turn. We come in with another AoE nuke on Kegs of Dread. Before attacking, we get the increased accuracy. And then we True Fear all the enemies that are not dead yet after 2 AoE nukes. So they have no buffs and they're CC'd. That's the best case scenario on this dude without his companion champion. Let's talk about the other factors though. So the damage, we don't know his multipliers. 2 AoE attacks. We're not expecting him to be like an arena uber nuker. However, nor were we expecting Eric's to be a great AoE nuker, being HP based. So if he's a great damage dealer, then the conversation certainly changes. So TBD there. The second thing is the buff. Increased accuracy being on his A3 instead of his A2 really kind of stinks, you know? Now, the downside to it being on the A2 is we would lose a turn of duration vis-a-vis the extra turn mechanic that he gets in that ability. But I'd definitely rather take that and have that increased accuracy, decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns, because we need to nail that to get and trigger that extra turn. Now, obviously, affinity is going to be an issue too, right? So I think that brings me to my third point. And that's why, even though this guy definitely has some potential with the extra turn mechanic, the not triggering polymorph, which is going to be, you know, a highlight to me of his kit. That's the first thing that I looked at here. And it's the first thing that you guys should consider as well. The only problem is all the things that can go wrong still. There's still a lot of protected buffs out there in the game, you know? There's Bolster to deal with. There's Stone Skin to contend with as well. And if anything goes wrong, and Affinities to contend for, as I mentioned. If anything goes wrong, and you don't have Kaja the Rai, you know, TBD on how good she is and how easily accessible. With Alsgore Crimson Helm, she was a guaranteed shard opening champion. He was, excuse me. So we'll see. But I'm not going to evaluate a champion based on their companion who we don't even know about. I'm evaluating him in a vacuum, right? So anyway, there's a lot that could go wrong where he won't get the extra turn. And if he doesn't get the extra turn, then, I mean, who cares about an increased accuracy buff when we have to wait an entire cycle for everybody else to get turns before we can use it? And then True Fear, when they likely have active buffs anyway, such as, I don't know, block debuffs. And that's where his kit kind of falls apart to me, you know? Maybe some potential here. We don't know, again, his damage. And hey, if we can pull off the best case scenario as we outlined, you know, that's pretty cool. It will be fun as well, and certainly can work in other environments, again, such as Doom Tower progression. He's easy to keep alive, which makes him an ideal control champion. But overall, it's, to me, there's just too much that has to happen for it to be 100% reliable. What I would have liked to see is increased accuracy on the A2, or the duration decretion, is that the right word, cannot be resisted on the A2. You know, that would have made the kit a whole lot more intriguing to me, because to me, he's clearly a PvP champion who is meant to combat polymorph, but I don't think they nailed the mechanics. I think it's going to be too difficult to trigger back to back, to set up, if you will. And for that reason, I don't think he's a must fuse or must fragment for anybody out there. I will be going for this fragment summon because I'm curious to see him in action. And, well, frankly, you know, I'm a content creator, so I want to do a guide on this dude. But I think that you can probably safely pass on this champion and likely will not regret it, but you just never know, do you, on these champions until we see them in game. Speaking of which, I will have a guide on this champion when he's available, and let me know what you think. Are you going to go for this fragment summon, or are you going to hard pass? Again, I imagine most people will be hard passing, but I wanted to make this video specifically about the polymorph mechanic, and, you know, I figure everybody's going to be hating on him, so at least talk about, okay, what's the best case scenario with this dude. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.